And hello, esports fans, and welcome to another week of the PCS Spring Split 2022. We are officially halfway through. We're getting into the second round robin starting today with a few extra games just for a little added sizzle. Hey, everybody, I am Pyrotechnics, joined on this broadcast by Clement Chu. And Clement, we have got some fantastic ones today, some real bangers. Before we get into the breakdown of how it's all going to go, I would like to take a moment to thank our wonderful sponsors on the split. They are, of course, CTBC Bank and Caliber. Thank you for making the PCS possible. Now, Clement, we're on patch 12.4. It finally happens, and we've got Renata Glaski enabled. It's going to be a good day for supports, I can tell.
Yeah, she has a great win rate, and I really see a lot of teams actually going for her. Great in these sort of knife fight situations. You can make one of your teammates invulnerable for quite a while, like they just can't die. So if you are willing to use her, I think she will turn around a lot of these fights where both sides aren't running any tanks whatsoever.
Yeah, not to mention the ultimate. I mean, really talking about adding some chaos into these team fights. I'm excited to see what our PCS supports make of this champion. I know we were talking about, before the broadcast, the relative preferences, the relative strength levels, who we thought were going to pick it up. I think a couple of teams we're watching today certainly will take to that champion pretty quickly, but we have so many games to play today, and in large part due to we have some catch-up to play. I talked about second round robin starting today, but in addition, we've got PSG Talon has to play 3 whole more games over the course of this week as they only have 6 games on the split right now. That's 5-1, not a bad record to start, but we'll talk about how they got there after this. Currently the standings, CTBC, Flying Oyster, and Deep Cross Gaming sharing the top at 7-1 apiece, but of course tiebreaker does go to CFO. Taipei J-Team right after that, and PSG Talon bringing in the top 4, but Megabank Beyond Gaming not far after that as they had a huge victory over CFO at the end of last week.
Exactly. Right now in our standing, it's still all about the 3 J-Team kingdoms as they all are in the top spots. And talking about PSG, they're in a very interesting spot. They're sitting at 4th place, but all of their wins have came from 6th to 10th spots on the slide right here. So this week is huge for them because they get to play the actual kings of the PCS in these 3 J-Team teams.
Talk about getting a serious test. I mean, strength of schedule-wise, we were looking into it to start things off, saying, all right, PSG, they have a pretty good record with their new mid and jungle, but how tough has it been for them? Well, it's been pretty darn tough in this next week, but hasn't been up until this point. And for our player of the week, of course, Frank Esports, Eminem, the bot laner. We weren't necessarily expecting him to come out swinging as hard as he did this last week, but certainly put up the numbers to prove it. And you know, this is another point I wanted to get into. I feel like our bot laners are absolutely stacked this season.
It's really crazy, and I want to say congratulations to Frank Esports. They posted their first positive week of the split, largely behind the carry potential of Eminem. He's really just like the sole hyper carry that we have in the PCS, rocking 30% of the team's gold, over 30% of this team's damage, and just putting everything on his own back.
Yeah, I think this is a team that is slowly starting to come together. We talked about how they had to put together a roster at just about the literal last minute, and it started to pick up. I'm curious to see if they can maintain that form over the course of this week, getting into the second round robin, getting to play Azeri, certainly looking pretty hype as he got to in that game, and we're going to get to watch a little bit more here of the MFT game that you would think these two teams kind of right in the middle of the pack, but while one started out a little hot and started to fall off, it's been the exact opposite for Frank Esports here as they've just started to pick up these wins. I'm curious to see what the rest of the team can do around Eminem because he certainly proved himself this week, but I want to see a little bit more about some of the other carries. I want to see more out of Pretender, even though he's had some good games. He was the stand-in for PSG Talon, and I want to see him prove if he is going to be able to make a name for himself going forward on this roster, on Frank Esports.
Yeah, the big storyline about Frank is, even though Eminem has been really consistent, taking a bunch of resources, we actually have Pretender coming up being more efficient in terms of his damage-dealing stats, and also Kirk showing up that he can play champions like Gwen, which are incredibly important in the meta. So it definitely isn't just like a one-man show. Sure, I think Eminem is still going to get the majority of the resources, but the rest of the team has really stood up, and I think that will place them above most of our bottom half teams. I think a lot of the teams that we're seeing kind of going into that 8th to 10th place spot have those issues because they have fewer than one carry.
Yeah, that's always a little rough when you don't have someone you can lean on as reliably, and Frank certainly have all the tools to make it happen. Now, looking back at what we saw last week, of course, this was on patch 12.3. I don't expect too much to change in the pick and ban, with a couple of notable exceptions. Zeri, of course, 100% ban pick, and when picked, 100% win rate. No surprises there. Gwen also continues to be a very high priority force in the PCS with about a 58% win rate. Certainly not too bad in the hands of most of our top laners. Also can be flexed into the jungle. And speaking of, Xin Zhao continues to rule that particular roost. And I think this is just kind of a who's who of the most important picks for our region and for most regions right now. But that may shift a little on 12.4. I have seen Hecarim picked up in priority quite a lot over the course of a few weeks around the world. Everyone's kind of waking up to the fact that maybe this guy is just a little bit more horsepower than the likes of Lee Sin or Xin Zhao. 4 legs are better than 2 after all.
Is incredibly consistent as a team fight oriented jungle, and he can also gank very well, especially against a lot of these bot lanes that we're seeing today with the Jinx, with the Aphelios. It's kind of hard to get away from the murder pony. So I think Hecarim is still going to rise in popularity. Overall, though, 12.4 is not a major patch. I think it really just introduces Renata. So I see most of these champions still staying around in the same ban pick kind of priority, especially for Zeri. She's not going anywhere, still over 90% presence, even on the new patch.
Yeah, curious to see if Renata does get reacted to the way we think and just considered a very much a champion that must be picked or picked away. We might very well have some hard choices being made by some of our teams. But let's take a look at today's matches. As I mentioned, we do have 6 games today due to the delays from PSG. They have to make up by playing 6 games over the course of this week. 2 of them today. The first one, that's the match I got my eye on, Clement, as PSG take on J-Team. J-Team Original, if you will. If you wanted to get into new J-Team or J-Team Classic or J-Team Light, whatever we want to call some of the other squads. They do have their own names, of course. But this first match, I feel like this is a real test for a squad that has yet to beat a team in the top 4.
Ooh, this one is absolutely huge. All eyes on kind of Juhan and Bei's journey as they face the 3J teams. If you're talking about a commonality between all of the top 3 teams, is that they have great junglers. You're talking about Gemini, you're talking about Hana, and you're also talking about Kongyue. So I think this week, especially for Juhan, is really going to just showcase whether he deserves to be in the top spotlight there alongside with, I think, most of the J-Team mid-jungle duos.
Yeah, absolutely. Other games that we're looking forward to over the course of today, I think Meta Falcon team definitely still have a little bit of work to do before I'm going to rate them up with Deep Cross, so maybe not that one, but in particular Frank Esports on the rise, depending on how this J-Team match goes earlier in the day, that could make for an interesting one. And then, of course, CTBC Flying Oyster, rather, they're going to look to bounce back against the loss against Megabank Beyond Gaming. However, they are doing it against an Impunity squad that I think up until last week we had a lot of high hopes for. Now it seems a little bit iffy.
It does. I feel like Impunity still have the same weakness, but they were the closest team to challenge CFO before Beyond Gaming. Now, of course, looking at our first matchup, Taipei J Team, as we all know, all eyes on kind of Kongyue and Uniboy. Uniboy has been absolutely tearing it up. You cannot give this man Zoe. Syndra is off limits, and he just hasn't really died on those champions whatsoever. So it's going to be a great showcase to see if the Korean duo from PSG can actually keep Uniboy down.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough ask for sure. Kongyue and Uniboy have definitely comboed up well. They came into the squad looking very hyped together. And, you know, people that aren't as familiar with the PCS should recognize them as stand-ins on PSG back in 2020. This whole squad certainly bringing them in, hoping that they can get off to a flying start. Lil V, of course, being their late-game insurance. Driver and Enzo maybe not quite as strong as the rest of that core trio. However, they've still been able to hold their own. And Uniboy, yeah, you talked about how he hasn't really died on some of those stronger champions. He hasn't even died in their losses. Uniboy has been an absolute incredible performer. Only 6 deaths across the split so far, and those were in their 2 losses combined. Now their opponents tonight are going to be PSG Talon, the team that is looking to crack into the top 3 and reclaim their dominance, but they have a different core, or at least a different mid-jungle than we were familiar with last split. Juhan and Bae coming in from NS Red Force over in Korea have had some impressive performances, but it is worth noting that their opponents have all been in the bottom half of the bracket so far, so it is a big test for the Korean mid-jungle.
Exactly, and I think the big things that we have to point out is this bottom lane. I think for now, PSG, most of their lead just comes from the fact that Unified and Kaiwing are crushing it against the bottom half of the dual lanes, and this is going to be sort of a real test here. Enzo, of course, is a new support, but Little V has been around for a long time. We know that he can play those hyper carries, and this current iteration of J-Team is pretty focused on their bottom side. You know, Driver has kind of been your weak side top laner. I don't think Hanabi's going to get a lot of love either. So if you're looking at how this game is going to develop, the bot lane matchup is going to be incredibly important. And we are talking about new champions coming into the mix as well. So it's going to be interesting to see, number one, who's going to pick up that Renata first, and who's going to actually have the better gank setup. I think those questions are going to dictate the flow of the game.
Absolutely, and it's kind of interesting to see how the flip might go, right? Because while we think of Juhan as somebody who is kind of primarily going to be focused a little bit more on Bae and Unified being able to hold his own with Kaiwing down bot, I would certainly expect Kongyue to be paying quite a lot of visits down here. As J-Team, they want to prioritize giving Lil V a chance to get into that late game, but we are into picks and bans. There is going to be the Zeri band away, and of course, J-Team have done their homework a little bit. Ryze is gone for base, so is the Akali, so a fairly heavy focus on that mid lane, although Akali not been one of the champions Bae has picked up. We have seen it in a couple of lanes so far in this split.
It's very interesting to see that PSG are not really banning away any of the Uniboy champions. We're talking about Syndra and Zoe being left open till now. So it looks like Bae is fairly confident that he can just play standard mages and maybe get away with it. On the other hand, J-Team, they know the trick. Juhan and Bae, they pretty much play Lee Sin and Ryze as their go-to combo. There's plenty of execution, plenty of just stun combination with the realm, with the rune prison there. So taking that away forces them to play something else. And to be honest, we're not really sure what Bae is super comfortable on outside of that Ryze, excuse me. So it's gonna be a big test for them. And J-Team, you know, if it ain't fixed, don't break it. You're still going to go for the Gwen first.
Yeah, you know, we talked about how top may not get a lot of love, but you don't need to get a lot of resources fed into you when you're playing the likes of a Gwen. Both of these players have looked great on it. It's kind of a no-brain takeaway from Hanabi. If you watched him at Worlds, you will know exactly why that man should not be allowed to have the Hollowed Seamstress. On the opposite side, PSG are going to go ahead and opt to pick the Jinx up in their first rotation. Juhan gets a comfortable Lee Sin pick, and of course the handshake goes through with Lil V on the Aphelios, and that should follow suit with a support pickup as Enzo will be able to lock in his by far most played champion in the Nautilus for a 7th game this split.
Yeah, so far it looks like very standard ban pick procedures
no
here.
Renata.
Yeah, no Renata. I honestly feel like Renata is going to be a more specific pick in situations. I don't think she's going to be a blind pick support in most times. She doesn't really have the engage power like a Nautilus or a Leona, and her laning strength isn't really that strong compared to some of the enchanters. So I think she's going to be a very situational pick where you already know the enemy is running like a triple dive composition and they're going to be very easy to target. Those are the situations I would see Renata at maximum potential. But for now, I think this is pretty much standard. The PCS support pool isn't going to change that much. We are still very much in love with just hard engaged champions.
Certainly the case when it comes to the likes of Kaiwing, and also Enzo has been loving that Nautilus, especially. Certainly not the only one in the split. Into the second phase of bans, though, you can see the focus on certain players starting to come through here. PSG opting to ban out 2 jungles, including the Poppy that was picked up by Kongye. That is winless, by the way, with him. But the Gnar ban away from Hanabi as well. I wonder if J-Team opts for another top lane pick.
So I think if you're a J-Team, you're probably thinking about Gameplank and the Gnar. Those are your 2 kind of big go-tos for Hanabi in this certain matchup. Hanabi certainly can play the Tryndamere, but overall I don't think it's PSG's strong point, and there you see the Gameplank being banned out. The Poppy is very interesting because you typically only ban out Poppy if you want to play a very offensive composition. Poppy is great at shutting down gap closers and people that are trying to rush at your face, but she's not really a full spectrum jungler. I don't think she is good on engaged situations. I don't think she provides that strong of an early game. So it does signal very clearly that PSG are trying to rush forward. And indeed, we see a tempo pick coming out here from Bay. The Ahri right now is pretty much akin to sort of an assassin type of champion. She does a whole load of burst damage, and she has reset potential alongside with Jinx. So you can see PSG, they're definitely thinking about a composition that is going to be very explosive, which is actually counter to their usual gameplay.
Absolutely, and I do like the switch up here from PSG on the J-Team side. It looks like we are going to be seeing some splits with the Gwen flexed into the jungle as Driver will get his hands on the Tryndamere. This was something we talked about, Gwen being able to do, even though it's primarily picked up topside. It gives options when there's so many jungle bans thrown out, and of course, to pair it up, even though you typically think of Orianna as more of a team fighter, there is some ball delivery here, and in the hands of Uniboy, I mean, all you had to see was what he did last week, and picked up an insane scoreline on that champion. His more utility mages certainly look like they can dish out a lot of damage. Now, the only question we have left is to see what Hanabi's going to do to answer this. The Jace has been a pick before that we've seen to try and match the pressure of the Tryndamere on the side lane, and not as heavy on the team fighting, but maybe that's the option that PSG want. No, Gragas, okay.
I didn't really like the Jace pick because I feel like it leans PSG's entire composition way towards the early game and actually winning out with Ahri and Jace. That's not a gambit that we've actually seen 2022 PSG go for. In 2021, yes, they would try to do like a full spectrum press, but I don't think that's their current identity. And I do like that they're just going for Gragas. This is, again, a lane that is more about neutralizing the Tryndamere more than anything. It's going to be good in team fights, and it does give them more of a 5v5 out. I feel like if you're running the Jace, you are so susceptible to just getting run down by champions like the Nautilus, the Gwen, and the Tryndamere. So I do like this Gragas a little bit more. It makes their composition, in my perspective, a little bit more comprehensive. They can play more styles with this Gragas pick.
Yeah, and again, you don't need to match pressure for pressure when you have Hanabi in the top lane. He's kind of extremely comfortable. He's almost the poster child for playing weak side top lane in this league, and he's been able to do it for so long, so an experienced player, that you shouldn't have too many worries unless something goes horribly, horribly wrong in the early stages of the game. For PSG, it does look like they have a relatively comfortable comp. I'm excited to see what Bay is going to make of this Ahri, because so far he's not had to step out of the Raya's comfort zone too often, and now it's going to be a little bit different up against the Orianna of Uniboy, which is not exactly a high-pressure champion in most people's hands, but I feel like he's one of the ones that could make it that way, and there's a lot of damage here for side lanes, a lot of good splitting. I think J-Team have given themselves some options, and we could be in for a very interesting mid-game, I feel.
Yeah, for me, these compositions are definitely a contrast between early game, you get the Lee Sin and Ahri from the side of PSG, and more late game focus from J-Team as they have the Orianna, the Tryndamere, and the Gwen. So those are those hyper carry picks that really can destroy teams single-handedly if they get past the 30-minute mark. While this is a huge test for PSG, we have seen Juhan and Bay, but I don't think they've really showcased themselves as being a tempo duo. they actually play pretty slow, and they like to play more of a side lane style. We've seen the Rise and Lee Sin kind of go for two-man ganks elsewhere. Kongya could give themselves an opening here if he does walk up the ramp, and he's going to think better about it.
It's all bait. It's all bait. You know Kongya likes to get aggressive early. Juhan's trying to be like, hey, you can 1v1 me, right? But that's too obvious. They're not going to fall for that one. Yeah, I am curious about how this 2v2 was going to go early on in the game, because Juhan and Bei have not necessarily been tested against the best of the best, and this week it's starting to... We're going to start to finally see that here. And on the J-Team side, I think J-Team, their goal is to firmly maintain control of the top 3 position, right? Because right now, the other J-Teams, if you will, the Deep Cross Gaming, the CFO, those are the squads that are looking a little bit better than you. But if you can establish dominance over a team like PSG and keep your third place position, things start to look pretty good for the second round robin as Driver runs straight into Hanabi, maybe going a little bit deep here, but he could set Juhan behind, and he might just do that.
Yeah, we have seen this play from so many different top laners. It's basically, if you're going up against Gragas that doesn't really do that much level 1, you're pretty happy in just going in there and sort of annoying the jungler. If you force them to get a smite down, that's actually huge for their jungle clear. And we do see here, Juhan is like, I'm not going to take any risk for this. I'm just going to smite it down early. So that is a small win, definitely for Driver, a very common tactic that we see these days.
And it worked out really well when you're trying to slow down a team that wants to get off to an early start, right? Talking about how J-Team are perfectly happy in the late game. Those are small things, but they can compound over time. I do want to see how this bot lane goes, because you do look at some of the experience difference in between the AD carries. It's not as stark, but for Kaiwing and Enzo, it doesn't get a whole lot wider than that. And I think the support diff could be a big factor in this game.
Yeah, you are talking about a career support versus someone that just switched over to the position in the previous split. And as you can see, they are getting pushed in quite early on. I don't expect J-Team to prioritize this lane earlier. You can tell by the summer difference that this is going to be a very defensive setup from J-Team. They have that cleanse on the Aphelios. They just want to survive this and make it to the late game. And the question really is for PSG is that how much can they get away? As you can see, Juhan is paying a terrible price for that level 1 sort of invade. As a jungler, you really want to use that smite on the big raptor rather than the red buff.
Feels bad, man, but maybe Juhan can make up for it by getting a play off early on. The question is, where does he focus, right? Does he want to make the long trek up to top lane and try and shut down Driver? Well, does that really do anything for your team? Because Hanabi is not necessarily there to try and win a lane. Bot's already pushed in. Mid, I mean, good luck ganking an Orianna. It feels like he doesn't have a lot of good choices right now.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be an issue. I think the Ahri is definitely the lane that you want to focus on the most. Ahri has traditionally been sort of a counter to Orianna because you can just E-flash her, and there's not much that the Orianna can do to respond to that. She doesn't have a gap closer on herself, so it's very difficult for her to play safely against that. However, I do think that in earlier levels, it is possible for the Orianna to actually push this lane in. I just feel like Uniboy is actually just trying to play a little bit safer here. And he's getting pushed in because of, I would assume, the minion dematerializer doing work earlier on. But
he's got to protect his KDA, man. He hasn't died in the wins.
Exactly. No, we have a saying for Uniboy in the past that he definitely likes to play with balls. All of his champions that use balls and spheres, like the Orianna, the Syndra, and the Zoe, have been absolutely excellent.
He should know Ahri, then. He should know how to play against Ahri.
That's true. She kind of uses spheres as well.
Yeah, not exclusively, right? Like, Ahri doesn't, only use spheres and balls. She also throws hearts and little will-o'-the-wisps and things like that. But, she's a fox spirit. They like to mix it up a bit.
Yeah, you got to keep everyone guessing right there. And take a look at the top lane. This is a lane where we actually have seen Hanabi do very well in, especially with the kind of setup that he's running here, the grasp. You can see him sitting on a very comfortable CS lead, and he has gone for the tier in the past, as a 2v2.
I think Gongye actually ended up getting the better of that because Uniboy comes in to try and help secure. A little bit of counter jungling with Juhan trying to make up for his earlier start. However, this will lead into a moment that they can grab an early dragon. And, I do like this priority. PSG have actually been pretty solid at picking up the dragons in their game. Currently, they're sitting at about 2.3, 2.4 dragons per game. It's about 4th place in the league. And J-Team is one of the squads that do a little bit better than them, actually. And it does roughly correlate with who's winning and who's not, let's be honest. But dragon priority is something that, teams aren't always going for when you want to trade, you want a handshake for the Herald instead. PSG are a team that do like to focus on that bottom side.
Yeah, I think you made a great point that in terms of statistics, Herald is actually much more indicative of how well an early game is going compared to the first Drake. That's been true since the previous season for sure, but it is still true now, even with the addition of the Hextech Drakes. On paper they provide a lot of power, but the calculus is still more or less the same in that regard. In terms of this early game, what I'm really looking for is at least a 3-kill advantage towards PSG. I feel like if they don't get that, a lot of these champions they sort of descale themselves into the late game. If you're thinking about Ahri, she really has this sort of need to be a huge damage threat in order to access the majority of her power locked into those resets coming in from Spirit Rush. And the same thing goes for the Gragas. Like, if he doesn't get sort of ahead of his opposition, he can't just get run down in lane. And Lee Sin is kind of the same thing. So I think for now, even though PSG holds on to the gold lead, they still need the kills. The kills are really going to be necessary to kind of propel this composition forward.
Yeah, and I think you also need to try and get the kills for resets onto Unified, right? You want to be able to build up a consistent gold lead that then turns into an item lead, because a Jinx that pops off does so much. The only difference between her and the champions you mentioned, though, is like Jinx can always come in and make a play, but it gets a lot harder when you're in the late game and you just have been starved. On the other hand, Unified has picked up a very healthy CS lead over Lilvi, but you did mention we kind of expected this lane to be pushed in, this lane to go a little hard. And until junglers intervene, that's probably not liable to change. But all eyes are going to be on PSG, especially in that mid, to see if they can pick up some kills early on. However, Kongye is taking a trip down bottom.
Yeah, but we also have Bey just constantly poking towards the bottom side. I absolutely love this from mid lane players. If you're not in the lane, you just want to disappear from vision and put a lot of pressure elsewhere. But I would say in terms of like the game tempo overall, I'm a little bit surprised that Juhan has not attempted a single gank so far. That's a big question mark for me. Basically, you let Kongyu kind of free scale to level 6, and in terms of the first skirmish potential, J-Team are definitely packing heat in this one. I don't think PSG actually has a sizable advantage when it does come to those early game skirmishes. And, that just means that if they want to set up something that is going to be more decisive, they're going to have a lot of vision control. I fully expect them to kind of shift the bot lane towards the top Herald in order to find a play.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to, because this has been a little bit of a slow start for a team that wants to be able to build up that lead. And, sure, Hanabi's been able to stop Driver from doing a whole lot to his tower. Bey has been threatening, but not actually executing anywhere on the map, and Unified's got a healthy lead. But you're right, it's not enough for the way that they've built this composition right now. So we need to see a play happening. Surprised Juhan hasn't made a visit. Now the pings go down on the bottom side. It looks like we might be in for a dive as they look to set up vision control. This isn't spotted here by Enzo and Lilvi, and they have to know something's happening. That's going to be the setup. It should force them off, even if the dive doesn't go through. This is going to be plates, but you'd think they would much rather prefer to secure up a kill.
A really good timing coming in from PSG here. Like, they know the TP isn't done. Oh, but Juhan's showing a little bit too early.
Yeah, he could get caught. Safeguard does go through, and he does still get knocked up, but he's out at this point. So, at the end of the day, it's just a plate, really. Burned, and Driver goes for the big dive on the bottom, and that is going to be the tournament of the belly bump in first blood. He heals just enough through it to secure it for J-Team.
Absolutely beautiful. Has that extra combat summoner to close the gap, and he knows where the opponent jungler is. I feel like PSG, they found a good timing, but they didn't move their pieces as well as they could have. I actually felt like they could have left lane a lot earlier in that situation. There was no chance that Uniboy is chasing an Ahri. He didn't really need to full push the wave, and this has kind of been my criticism for PSG's like mid jungle. I feel like at times they don't play aggressive enough with the tools that they're given here. That was a great timing. Uniboy still didn't have his TP. Juhan was already in position. I really think that Bey, if he just moved a little bit earlier, could have made that bottom lane trade. And Hanabi, this is honestly on him. He knows his jungler is showing, but he was way too far forward.
Yeah, Driver knew exactly what to do at this point. Did end up getting flash for flash, nice belly bump, but it was never going to be enough with the heal up at the end. PSG do manage to secure Herald, though. So, neutral objective-wise, they're doing all right, but that's not really what you want when you built a team for some of these earlier skirmishes, as they now complete the swap up the top side, looking for Driver, not going to find him, so it just ends up being a plate trade.
Yeah, this is actually really well done in terms of the laning situation. As you see in the top side, PSG has this wave already shoved to tower, while J-Team are just now hitting the tower. So they're going to get a massive tempo advantage, and I wouldn't be surprised if PSG just go for a second Herald Charger. They should be able to with very minimal trouble.
So this is going to get traded, at least for the one tower, by Kongye and Lilvi until Hanabi is able to peel them off of it. And critically, I thought this actually might be a worse trade for PSG because the Dragon was being started by Kongye, but he peels off it immediately when he realizes the trade is happening, and all of a sudden everything comes up PSG. That's a big gold swing in their favor. They should be able to get away for free. Still no kills in this game, though, and you got to wonder just a little bit, you know, is the gold share coming across? I mean, a lot of it was picked up by Unified. That's critical, but he's still not sitting on a Mythic just yet.
I would say that's massive coming in from Unified to get a Mythic this early. All of the turret gold was shared between Juhan and Unified, so that's just going to mean that they can roll into into the Drake pit right now without having serious challenge, I think, from J-Team. They are sitting on a pretty big gold spike. If you look at the items, that's Juhan with the Gore Drinker, that's Gale Force and the Berserker Greaves completed already for Unified, so they should be taking this Drake with a lot of confidence.
Yeah, and this is something that J-Team knows is happening, but it should go pretty quickly. Enzo looks to try and interrupt, but I think he's just going to go ahead and slam down that ward, and J-Team a little bit slow to react. Gale Force has been matched, by the way, for Lil V, but yeah, just not enough, and of course there's a boot diff as well. And we have got a Hex Gate Rift going on right now. This is going to be a whole lot of fun mobility. I really love this one. Uniboy. Oh no, Uniboy. Oh no, the bait, the trap. Oh, the kick, the dive. Uniboy is trying to walk it out, but Base says not today. Oh, one more hit, Sully. The bait. Can't get it. Kongye saves his life.
That was unfortunate for Juhan. He doesn't get the kick off to go correctly. The direction actually sent Uniboy back to his own base. I think Uniboy flashed just in time to get the angle there. But that just means PSG lose a lot of their momentum. They were actually threatening both mid lane and bot lane at the same time, but J-Team just come up with a better play. Uniboy, great work there.
Yeah, Uniboy definitely hanging tough, and Kongye able to help by turning it back his way, picks up a kill for himself on the carry jungler. So, as it stands, neutral objectives in PSG's favor, 2 towers to 0, as well as 2 dragons to 0, but J-Team, 2 kills to nothing.
Yeah, this is a weird position because I don't think at this point J-Team are even afraid to take the 5v5 if it does come down to a Drake Gambit. So, for me, what PSG have to do is they have to continue to snowball Unified. He is the strongest point on the map right now. He is very far ahead of his gold, and they should just try to play towards that lane and make sure that they can continue to snowball. If he gets to a 2-item spike before Lil V can do anything, then I think they have an iron grasp on that Drake that's coming up. They have a very quick Drake timer. It's 8 minutes, and it's going to be a 21-minute Hextech Drake Force, which is a Hextech Soul Force, excuse me, which is going to be very detrimental. So J-Team are going to have to contend with that, and right now PSG, they should shift their strategy. I feel like Lee Sin Ari honestly has not worked out for them. They should just focus on Unified, making sure that he always has the item lead.
Yeah, Unified's always a good bet, though. Juhan gonna run into Enzo. It looks like we've got ourselves a good old skirmish down here as a lot of knockups and trying to dash away. Lilvi actually going to go for it, but they just runs out of steam. So does Juhan. Kaiwing Unified on the run. Driver in the front looking to get the chicken off on somebody here as he dashes forward, forcing the flash. Kongye looking to cut him off in the pass, and this is going to be 4-4-0 as Kongye gets the final kill. 6 now in favor of J-Team. They just have the team fighting power.
Outsmarted and outplayed right there. J-Team read PSG like a book. I guess it's not just the casters, but everyone knew that they were going to try and focus on Unified's lane, so they had the pieces waiting for there. Unfortunately for Juhan, he just burned his flash in the previous play. They know they can ambush him quite easily, and he stays around for it. Let's be completely honest. You know, Bay rushes in straight into a Nautilus, gets absolutely nothing done. He gets 3 charges and instantly dies. So, unfortunately, the Korean mid-jungle here, I just feel like they didn't really do their due diligence. No walls across the Tri-Ward brush. They actually faceplant into the Nautilus, and this roam from Driver is absolutely beautiful. He doesn't have a top lane tower to worry about. There's nothing for him to actually defend there, and Gragas is not going to take your inhibitor tower. So that was a great move from him. There was absolutely nothing to lose, and he's now sitting 3-0-2.
And it's back to what you're talking about, Clement. If Juhan and Bey on this Lee Sin and Ahri didn't get off to a rolling start, they were going to be not particularly useful in the skirmishes. And look exactly what happened. They kind of got flat-footed there, and they just couldn't get any damage off. They get blown up and deleted. Bey needs gold desperately, so he's going to be on the side lane pushing it in. Just comparing, I mean, like, Uniboy has that late game Orianna in his pocket. He doesn't need the kills, but he's already got his mythic item completed. Bey is just struggling to match in gold, even though he's been even in farm. Meanwhile, Driver is going to get some of that standing gold on the map by taking out top turret finally. And sure, Dragon Timers are great for PSG, but the problem is they're gonna lose the scaling game if they're not careful.
Yeah, I feel like PSG right now, their win conditions have been drastically narrowed. They pretty much have to get this Hextech Drake. That would be my opinion. And the thing is, for J-Team, that's a very easy condition to play around. You have to think about the fact that, you know, if PSG go into the Drake pit and J-Team simply surround and get a full-on ace, that would still be considered a win. Like, they don't have to completely prevent the Drake from going to the enemy team. If they just kill them there and switch over to Baron, that's even a good trade. So I think in most scenarios, you do see J-Team actually coming out ahead there. In terms of the play in the bot lane, I feel like, unfortunately, PSG got baited by their own vision, but maybe they can take one back.
Maybe they can, but Driver is still able to hang in there. You can't quite burst a Tryndamere down as the rocket comes in, and oh, he's so close! But he stays alive, and Uniboy ensures it with a command protect. Oh my goodness. That's such a feels bad, man, when you're playing an Assassin champion like Ahri. You want that kill. It does buy them enough breathing room to take this Hextech Drake and get onto Soul Point at 17.5 minutes, but oh boy, I mean, PSG, the one objective they can't get is the kills this game.
Yeah, that's still a very good win. I think strategically, tactically, some mistakes there, but PSG strategically still win out. The Hextech Drake, 21 minutes earlier on, is still very powerful, and I think it gives them a lot of opportunities to chase targets down. If you're a Tryndamere and you run up against Juhan and Bey, then you're most likely dead if they can slow you with the Hextech Drake proc. So it's still good from PSG, but it's definitely a little bit worrying that I feel like Ahri she's starting to get to the phase where she's just not dealing enough damage. And this is what we've seen from Ahri's, and the way that LCK has kind of been playing around her is that you really need to snowball her. Her build naturally does not lend itself to a lot of damage. You're going for the Everfrost, that's more of a consistency thing, and you really need to stay ahead of the curve in order to be taking down these targets. Now, PSG, they still have a lot of chances to use these vision gaps and create these like 1-2 punch setups where they just kill one target and snowball from there. I think they've actually been doing a pretty good job at that so far, but it definitely needs to translate.
Yeah, they need to be able to secure something. I think the important thing is just to continue with the plan of feed the Jinx, right? Like, Unified, if they can do nothing but, like, throw out the charm and try to get a little bit of burst and then feed that over into Unified, that's still a win. He's still a half item ahead of his opposition. And Bey can still sit on the side lane and try to get work done. He just can't really fully delete anybody, so they're going to have to rely on that teleport timing. Now, the push is on here for J-Team. Hanabi looking to go through, but he gets cut off between Kongye and Driver. Meanwhile, the Needlework coming through. Can they turn this into the back line? I don't think they can. Driver already out of this fight here. Or excuse me, Hanabi already out of this fight as Driver is just wreaking havoc, but he is just barely going to run out of health. Finally, Shutdown Gold lands into Bey's pocket with the Foxfire, but it's still a 1-for-1 trade for J-Team.
Yeah, and that was a pretty big summoner trade as well. If you look across the board, PSG, they had to burn 2 flashes just to secure that kill onto Driver, while Driver gets to keep his. So that's a huge detriment in the upcoming Soul fight. You look across the board, like Kaiwin's not going to have engage, Unified is missing a heal. They had to flash to get that extra kill, and Hanabi also burned his as he chose a pretty poor path towards defending his tower.
Yeah, that was a little bit iffy there, and I think Hanabi's awareness on the map has not really been all that great this game, letting himself get soloed out by the Tryndamere when his jungler was showing earlier on, now taking kind of a sus position. I wanted to compliment PSG's ward coverage by using the Hex Gates to really get across the map in short order, covering parts of the J-Team jungle. The problem is they've kind of neglected their own jungle a little bit. You could see that on the bottom side. That was just completely opened up for Driver and Kongye to get into the back.
Exactly, and I think right now PSG, they can only pick up the map that J-Team are not on. At this point, this Tryndamere is a little bit too powerful, so I do like what PSG are doing. They know their top side is being compromised. Juhan's going into the bot instead, where we do see this 1-2 punch link up quite often when Juhan or Bei are playing together. They're getting these deep wards down. So I think PSG do have a chance to win this next fight. They have the vision control, and if Juhan can finally get a correct insect off, they could definitely do a lot of damage to the back line, like Lil V. You know, if they can just kick him forward, alley-oop him into a charm, I think that's the way that PSG want to approach this next Drake fight. They're already sitting at 3 Drakes. They definitely want to get the next one, but in terms of summoners, they're at a pretty big deficit, so they need to use their creativity.
That they do. Looking to try and set up a bait, but it hasn't worked so far. Maybe somebody like Kongye is a little bit easier to pick up. Even in the mist, you're happy to get close, but they get a little scared. There's a 4-stack there in the mid lane, and without that mid tier 1 turret, J-Team can muscle in and set up vision control on the Drake pit. And PSG don't seem super confident that they can take the straight up 5v5. There's a lot of tools you got to contend with, not only the side flanks, but there's always that Orianna ball. There's always the grouping up in the choke point that punished them before in bot try. J-Team looking to try and start a fight on their own terms. Kaiwing does get clipped. Hanabi, you got to be careful, man. He tried to go that way before. This time he's out to relative safety as he clears away the ward. A lot of pings fly. And it seems like everybody wants the dragon.
Yeah, I think PSG at this point, they're stuck in such a hard position. Maybe they can use the Hex Gate to try and get a steal, but otherwise, well, this is definitely a solution as PSG try to danger the Baron and hopefully pull the enemy off. But if I'm J-Team, I'm actually pretty happy to just let Tryndamere start this one alone. I'm pretty certain that they're willing to just put the 3-man against even potentially the 4-man with the help of the Baron there. So this is a really smart split from J-Team. I think it's the perfect reaction to when somebody is actually trying to fork you with the Baron.
Yeah, not only that, it was kind of an empty threat, right? The moment they sniffed up there, didn't even catch that there was a pink ward inside of the pit, immediately turned back. It's pretty obvious that they're not actually committed to this. It's a free start, and that totally sets back the timer that PSG were hoping to get on this Hextech Dragon Soul. Down to another 4.5 minutes, buys a lot of time as J-Team, again, they favor the late game at this point. The way they built their composition out, they can just keep the pressure on, delay, delay, delay. And PSG are going to have a hard time doing anything about it. The one late game insurance item that they really do seem to have is this Jinx, and well, Unified, he's not quite 3 items yet, so he's really only sitting onto that slim advantage, most of it coming from a CS lead he accrued early in this game.
Yeah, they had a big advantage in terms of the second item spike for Unified, but unable to find any fights with it. Juhan is setting up a Death Rush. Let's see if he can find anyone.
Okay, Lil V is going to cleanse out of it. Oh, the charm misses. Let's see if they have enough left in the tank to get the kill. The rocket will secure it. That's going to be the start of something. As the teleport comes through, Enzo taken low, forced out of the fight. Meanwhile, Uniboy Kongye in the front. Driver looking to flank round the side. PSG, they might fancy their chances on the Baron now that Lil V is out. But what can J-Team make of it? It looks like they'll just try to cut off the minion wave in the mid lane. I don't know about a fight. It would be a smite back and forth, but J-Team are far ahead enough, and Driver is threatening. Do they have enough tools left here, Clement? Down to 8,000, down to 7.5. This is tense.
Yeah, this is going to be incredibly close. Great play from Juhan right there, and I feel like PSG are going to use this as a bait to go in and wipe the floor with the J-Team.
Yeah, let's see if they can actually get it done. Actually going to try and take him down. The Undying Rage just finally finishes. Unified's able to stay alive, but the Baron is still aggro. J-Team know the jig is up here. And what a hard-earned Baron it was going to be. But PSG managed to secure kills and the objective, critically, the 2 onto the Jinx.
Absolutely huge play from Juhan. I'm a little bit surprised that Lil V actually ventured that far into the lane. Like, if you look at this team, they're very much aware of death brushes. They have 4 sweepers and 1 blue trinket. And somehow Lil V still gets caught by that. That's, to me, they were playing a little bit careless there. And I feel like Driver went way too early. It was very obvious for me that the PSG win condition was actually to just turn and kill. They're playing a 5v3. There's really no risk of them losing a team fight, so they're just kind of using that Baron as bait to get even more leverage. And J-Team, the way they should have played that was to threaten to steal rather than go all in. So we'll watch this again. I think unfortunately for Little V, he just got a little bit too complacent because his team was on the top side of the map. Gets caught out right there. Both summoners burn. And even though they nearly miss everything, they do get the kill at the end with the help of Unified.
Yeah, Unified on the Jinx Rocket. Ooh, Enzo flashing the wall, immediately throws the hook, doesn't actually land where he wants it to. And here's the counter collapse. They don't have all 5 members just yet. Got to get away from the needlework. There are the traps out, the Leona ultimate. So, PSG escaped from a bit of a rough situation as they ping back to defend. This is the tough situation with Baron, and being down in the tempo is you still have to kind of play the defensive game. Gold is just about dead even, but they need to secure that outer tower before they can start threatening. The Dragon, of course, coming up in a minute and a half. That's still soul point for them, and they would love to have that to buy themselves more time in this game. And here is the second wave of the push.
This is the Unified show. He's sitting on 3 items right now with his crit done, but he doesn't have a flash. So if J-Team can find that pick, not only are they going to stop this Baron, they're also going to stop the Dragon Soul. That's going to be what we're looking at right here. Can Tryndamere find that Jinx?
Bay? He goes in! He misses the charm at point blank, goes golden, does have the Spirit Rush. All of a sudden, it buys the time for J-Team to go for round 2. Driver already down to 1 HP, but he's undying as he takes down Unified. He will give his life for the cause, but that is a worthwhile trade as J-Team now march down the mid lane and force the reaction play from PSG.
That's absolutely huge because that means PSG's main damage dealer is not going to be there as the Drake spawns. I don't think he's going to have enough time to actually get there. Maybe with the Hex Gates it will be possible, but this should give J-Team some very solid timing windows to kind of set up for that eventual Hextech Soul that's coming up.
Yeah, that's massive, and it just feels like Driver's whole mission is to just go deep, get the kill onto the Jinx, and then it doesn't really matter what happens to him after that because he soaks up so many resources and so much CC while he's unkillable. So now J-Team, they're going to have him coming back to the fight a few seconds later. There is still a numbers advantage, and with Unified up, all they need to do is buy these 10 seconds, maybe try to secure a pick. They actually know Kongye is there, but they're letting him think that they don't. As the ward goes down into the pit, J-Team Uniboy Kongye all sniffing around the side. Here comes Driver. Here comes Lil V. It's going to be a straight-up 5v5 unless they get the deletion beforehand. And Clement, this could swing the game.
Yeah, I feel like PSG should play this a lot slower. They actually have more battlefield reset abilities coming from Hanabi, so they should set their ground and just hold on to the explosive cast. If they do that, I actually feel like they're in a very strong position right now. As we've been saying, Unified is still on that 3-item power spike over Little V, so there's a lot more damage coming through with that Jinx compared to the Aphelios. They just need to hold on to their abilities and inch this forward.
An elegant Dragon Dance here, and Kongye around the side to start things up. Kaiwing caught up, but they've actually been able to stiff arm him for the time being. Dragon, though, looking to go down here. They might be able to get the smite off. However, the fight is the focus. Bay taken low. Meanwhile, into the back. Here goes Driver, looking to the lead one. The steal comes through, does it, and Juhan steals the soul away. Can they take the fight, though? There's the explosive cast onto Little V, trying to limp away the flash. The belly dash, and there we go. Hanabi is going to get the kill credit. J-Team are the ones that are sent home. Killless and Dragonless. PSG with the swing.
Yeah, I like the idea there, but I'm a little bit confused as why they executed the flank with their jungler in Kongye. That definitely should have been Driver. Driver could have achieved the same result and secured the Drake with the smite there. You can see that PSG were very hesitant on going to finish off the Drake because they didn't have their jungler. Their jungler was sitting in the front line, and Juhan saw that perfectly. He just went in and smited it away. There was no contest there. So I like the idea of forcing PSG away, but the member they did it with was a little bit confusing. Kongye, remember, he's the guy with the smite right now. So with him being in the front line, J-Team, they can't even finish off the objective. They're like, where do we go? What do we do? Juhan is right there. If we don't finish off the Hex Drake, then, you know, then Gwen is kind of not sacrificing herself for nothing. And it allows Hanabi to even use his explosive cast offensively. So just kind of a puzzling fight there from J-Team. I felt like J-Team, they could have given up ground towards the Drake and then looked for a full-on surround to try and play that, but they just kind of went for a very puzzling kind of a two-headed strategy without the smite on the drink.
Yeah, it seems so weird that they focused their attention on keeping the aggro going when clearly the attention was turning towards the fight. And, credit to PSG for keeping their heads in that situation. I mean, realizing that all you had to do is keep Driver busy. Bay was able to dash out of harm's way just barely. And that was the other thing, is the focus was on Bay, not on the Unified by Driver. And then Juhan just, it's kind of the freest smite steal that he was going to be able to get. And as a result, PSG, they get Soul, they get 2 kills, and they get the tempo advantage. And even though the scaling goes in favor of J-Team, PSG should be feeling themselves in a 5v5. And, it's very heavy tank builds coming in for the non-carry members as well. As long as Bay can land the charm, honestly, he can kind of just line up the kills for Unified. And we have seen Jinx's pretty much solo pop off and carry a game. And he may only have the 3 items for now, but I have a feeling that's about to change.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be the case here. And we have Unified sitting at the only member over 300 CS. He's been
there we go, Guardian Angel.
Oh, and yeah, Driver's just not going to have the same impact. I think J-Team really need to map out these team fights a little bit better. We have seen this kind of as a constant weakness for J-Team, is the way that they play team fights seems very misguided at times, and they do have communication breakdowns. J-Team either needed to send Driver in, finish off the Drake in the last team fight, or they needed to go all in. Like, they basically chose kind of a middle route with no upsides whatsoever. So we'll see how they tackle the next one, but what we have to remember now is that the situation has changed, I think, into the advantage for PSG. They have a much stronger front-to-back team fight. Hanabi is completely scaled up. He has that Thimble Winter already, though. He can't take free damage like that. That's a little bit over.
You gotta be a little careful. I think, though, the solution to J-Team's team fighting problems might be to not do them, because Driver decided to build a Hullbreaker as his 3rd item.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the...
the late Hullbreaker. Don't see that as often. It's usually a premeditated strategy. And it is a big Tryndamere item, but it is odd that this is the point in the game he builds it.
The problem with the late Hullbreaker is, your opponent is running TP, so they still have the ability to match in most instances and still be there for team fights. While it's just kind of a faster push for you, but it's not really that much faster compared to just another offensive item here. So it's an interesting choice, but as we have seen for the most times, you really want to get that split pushing done early, crush your lane, and then have a massive padded advantage against a teleporting tank. So it's a lot less common here. I think what they're relying on right now is a lot more on this Gwen, actually. So the Gwen is going to have a lot of impact still into the back line, and because she does mainly magic damage, she's going to be less countered coming in from this GA. Still can be able to output a lot of damage, but if I'm PSG, I'm just willing to rush forward.
Yeah, they do land onto Kongi. The kickback into sideways, actually landing on Enzo here. The charm, again, just doesn't connect. Bay has had a hard time hitting those all the same. PSG, they're the ones making the moves, but the counterplay looks to come through here as J-Team lead the charge down. No Baron anymore. Hasn't been for a little while now, and Elder is going to be on the menu in another minute, so J-Team have to be careful not to lose a member. As Driver, of course, as a Tryndamere, he can usually get out of situations he shouldn't be allowed to, but you don't want to unnecessarily give up your ultimate before what could be a big objective fight.
In terms of the fork, the Elder is always going to take priority here as, they find Hanabi.
Okay, dash into the barrel. They actually have the hook on Leona. This is going to be forcing the fight as the Shockwave pulls in 2. And here we go. Kongi on the front, Driver on the side. They take down Hanabi, and this could be the clash with the counter turn into Driver once again into the Undying Rage. Does he have enough damage to finish off Bay? Root damage? No, not there. And they're still going on this one. Enzo, though, bites off more than he could chew. And while Bay stays alive, the trade onto the support for Hanabi's life makes it a 4v4.
Yeah, that was unnecessary from Enzo, actually. He just kind of gave up his life there. Didn't really need to throw out that last dredge line. And I think, crucially, that's all of the vision on J-Team. They didn't have time to do a reset here. So PSG has a great opportunity to just set up these visions. And, we haven't seen a lot of charm lands, but the threat is definitely still there. You have to walk through all of these brushes. Exactly. Only one charm is enough to get them this Elder.
Okay, so Elder is going to be starting right now with the 4v4. Enzo still 5 seconds off cooldown with no teleport. Hanabi does have his and should be joining the fight as soon as he's able.
Here goes Bay.
Bay does land the one charm. Oh, Driver! Okay, so they turn, but he peels away. The teleport comes through onto the minion of all things. They didn't have a ward where they wanted it, but it's a dangerous lane, and actually that's going to threaten the rest of J-Team. They're going to have to hope for a smite fight, but Gwen can't hop the wall the way Elise Sin can. This is just going to be seeded away, and PSG pick up the dragon by holding J-Team at bay.
Yeah, that was really smart macro play coming in from them. I love the positioning that Bay got there. If he landed that Everfrost, which, let's be honest, he definitely should have landed that Everfrost, that would have been absolutely disastrous from J-Team. I think they would have lost driver. Huh? Sure.
Yeah,
I'll take that.
Yeah, don't get anywhere near. Yeah, I mean, look, it's working at the end of the day. PSG finding themselves not so far behind in the gold game, but just slowly losing out and not able to find kills. Finally get a handful of fights, take advantage of unforced errors on the J-Team side, and just, I mean, they are going for objective domination, right? They've given up 3 towers, 1 dragon, and no other neutral objectives on the map.
Yeah, I feel like J-Team, there's a number of things that went wrong for them. Number one, I feel the third and the fourth Drake just going over to PSG was a little bit sus in my opinion. Those were definitely strategical outplays coming in from PSG. In the other hand, I don't think J-Team has utilized their split pushers enough. They've had a long time where Driver was dominating. And remember, this guy started the game with a 3-0-2 stat line. He was absolutely massive. He could go anywhere, and he wasn't even going for the normal yellow trinket because he was so far ahead. They didn't get to use that sort of a split push timing window whatsoever. And now they're dealing with an extremely fed Unified. And this is one of the first fights that Unified actually has both of his summoners there as well. So I think PSG is doing the absolute smartest of plays possible, just trying to do a straight up siege. In siege situations, it's much harder for J-Team to flank you. The angle of engage is very narrow, and I just feel like J-Team have to give up these towers. They don't really have an angle of attack here.
No, and maybe they can try for the counter engage if it's an overpush, but ooh, that reset Unified right on the front line, and he's just threatening, forcing the defensive dredge line out of Enzo. This is going to be wash, rinse, repeat. Look at how much damage they shred these towers down to as Unified just kind of runs wild, and J-Team, they're the ones that are just losing ground time and time again, and you talked about them not using their window. They really let that one slide as the big rocket comes in to push them off the turrets. Kongye trying to save the day, but it doesn't seem to be enough here as the last of the Nexus turret's going to fall. Driver into the back line. He may have the Undying Rage, but he's going to get charmed for days as down he will sooner or later go. Uniboy falls as well. Nobody left to defend here with Kongye going into the stasis for the final time, and Lil V fountain sitting right here. That is going to be GG as PSG Talon clean up J-Team.
And PSG make their mark here. That's the first top 3 team that they have been able to take down. A lot of questions, a lot of doubts, and I think they put away a lot of those concerns for us. For me, this game, PSG, in terms of their mid-jungle game plan, I don't think Bay and Juhan actually worked out all that well. We didn't really see Ahri have a lot of good charms. The snowball didn't work out, but their macro sense was still far and above what J-Team could offer here. They really shone in all of those teamfight situations. It's apparent to me that even though this is a team that has Juhan and Bay still trying to learn Mandarin, they have better team cohesion than J-Team that all speak the same language.
And sometimes, yeah, it's not a comms thing, right? It's just being on the same page, being able to execute at that level. And I think Bay and Juhan, we did see some of the weaknesses there of this newer squad that we would like to see them grow into. But there's plenty of time, right? I mean, these are players that were coming out of KR Challenger that were scouted for more of a long-term development by the side of PSG. They obviously have other players on their roster. We talked about Pretender, formerly known as Kana, who could always go back to that team later on. We don't know in what split, if it's going to happen. But you called attention to the macro play, the sense of the game and what they could do with it even when they were at a disadvantage. And I feel like that's always been a PSG strength. And even without the likes of Maple and River on this roster, the raw power there, they still have that game sense because the rest of the team is still the same. Even though there's a star power that seems to be missing it. I mean, the big brain's still there, right? Like you got Kaiwing, you got Unified, and you got Hanabi, and these are very experienced players that know how to play, even with a few mistakes. We could always call attention to looking at Hanabi in a couple of those engages.
Micro was kind of mad in this game,
but they dragged him around the map, and they also just used Unified win condition to the end, right? I mean, this is the reason Jinx is so popular right now, is that you just need a couple of kills to start popping off. It always feels a little bit better than the Aphelios side, if less consistent, and I think they honestly kind of maybe Driver debated himself, but it kind of felt like he was always in the 5v5s as a Tryndamere, which was very weird to see.
I think that was the main issue with this game as well. We have to remember that J-Team actually, they were able to get free scaling. This is a Lee Sin versus Gwen matchup, and there was no ganks pre-6 whatsoever. So Kongre had a very fun time just free scaling up. They started this game with a 6-0 lead, which is absolutely massive. I think the two big mistakes they made were, number one, just giving up over the third Drake, because Lil V was honestly just kind of careless. He just walked forward, gave himself over, and PSG were able to secure that third Hex Drake. And in the fourth one, J-Team completely messed up how they should have played that team fight. They went for a split. They did not commit to going forward. They did not commit to taking the Drake, even though PSG already gave them position. So that was just such a weird sequence of events to see. And congratulations for PSG for pulling this one out. They, in my opinion, had a worse scaling composition. Their early game did not work out, but they were able to claw back with critical plays and a better macro sense.
And even though they set themselves behind and committed some mistakes in not being able to get as much done early, which resulted in that gold lead and the tempo swing for J-Team, I feel like in losses you can learn a lot. In wins, you can't as much. This feels like a win that PSG can still learn a lot from, which is incredibly valuable considering they have to play the other top echelon of the league coming into this week. They will be playing CFO. They will be playing against Deep Cross Gaming. And Unified, the MVP, they're certainly going to look for him to dish it out. And yeah, 38.5% of the team's damage. That's what happens when you kind of put all your eggs in the 80 carry basket because the Ahri doesn't work out. And that's okay. 90% KP. They just kind of closed ranks around him, and he's got incredible positioning, I think, at the best of times, even though he lost his life a couple of times in a row. Unified, still Unified. I think he's, if not the best, certainly up there as the bot laners in this league.
I think if they are willing to commit a little bit more to snowballing Unified, this game would actually have been over much faster. They had a much earlier start on second item Power Spike, third item Infinity Edge Power Spike as well. So the question for me is to see if Bei and Juan can actually leave their lane a little bit sooner and get cleaner 4v2 dives. They had so much pressure on the 4v2, but they actually mismanaged it both times. If they actually secured that, I think the early game would have been much more different. And as we all know, they have probably the best macro sense still in the PCS. So there's definitely things to look forward to and very obvious areas of improvement for them.
Yeah, looking forward to PSG. They have 5 more games, but of course, right after this, we have 5 more games, starting, of course, with Meta Falcon Team and Deep Cross right after this.
CTBC Bank is Taiwan's top financial institution, but we're not stopping there. We're crafting an international brand and already have over 260 outlets in 14 countries. We are by your side, ready to embrace the future.